Hi everybody, Mark Moorhead here at the Hall of Flame Museum of Firefighting in Phoenix, Arizona. And today it's time for a little bit of story time. And our story today is called Fireman Joe. Let's check it out. Fireman Joe by Virginia Hunter. Illustrated by Marge Opitz. Fireman Joe waved whenever he saw Andy playing in his yard across the street from the fire station. And Andy, of course, always waved back. Sometimes Fireman Joe waved from the window of the big upstairs room where he and all the other firemen slept in a long row of beds. Sometimes he waved through the open doorway as he replaced the hoses on the big pumper engine. One day, Andy started to the grocery store with his mother. Halfway there, he suddenly heard sirens, and before Andy could even say, "Golly," the red pumper roared along the street. Following it was the long aerial ladder truck, with Fireman Joe riding on the rear platform. "Hello, Fireman Joe," waved Andy, but Fireman Joe went by so fast he didn't see him. Andy watched the engines turn a corner. "This must be one of Fireman Joe's busy days," he told his mother. And indeed it was. For the next block or two, Fireman Joe was busy holding on to the speeding truck, and when a strong gust of wind whipped his helmet from his head and blew it into the street, he couldn't even reach for it. Next, Fireman Joe was busy raising his big ladders to the top floor of the burning building. The other firemen were busy too, attaching hoses to hydrants and starting the pumps which pumped the water. So none of the firemen had time to see Andy coming down the street with his mother. But while his mother shopped in the store across the street, Andy watched them until it was time to go back home. By the time the clanging engines finally backed into the station once again, Fireman Joe was dripping wet and very tired. And Andy had already gone to bed in his house across the street. But before Fireman Joe could rest, he had to help the other firemen hang the wet hoses from the tower to dry. Then he had to make sure the trucks were ready to go again in case there was another fire. Finally, Fireman Joe could go to bed too. But first, he put his pants and boots beside his bed so that he could dress quickly if he had to. Then he, too, went to sleep. Fireman Joe woke in the morning remembering he had lost his helmet. "I'll have to get a new one," he thought, as he slid down the pole to begin another day. Just then, a small visitor walked into the station. It was Andy, and he was carrying a big brown paper bag. "What a big lunch for a small boy," smiled Fireman Joe. "It's not lunch at all," laughed Andy. "It's something better." Then he reached into the bag and pulled out, of all things, Fireman Joe's helmet. "I found it on the way home from the store yesterday," exclaimed Andy, "and I could hardly wait for today to come so I could bring it back." Fireman Joe was very happy. "You are a fine boy," he said. Then he had an idea. "How would you like to be a fireman today?" he asked. "We can always use an extra hand around here." And in the length of time it takes to put on a fireman's hat, Andy was a fireman. He shined the pole and polished fenders. He helped make beds and sweep floors. He even rode in the truck when it went out for an inspection. Finally, he sat down to lunch at the big kitchen table like a regular fireman. "I learned something today," Andy told Fireman Joe. "I learned that work is fun when you're a fireman." Then he got ready to take a big bite out of his sandwich. "But I also learned," he said, "that being a fireman makes you very hungry." The end. So that's Fireman Joe for our story time today here at the Hall of Flame Museum of Firefighting. I'm Mark, and check back soon. We'll have another story for you. Bye-bye.